Hello there, welcome to lesson number 3 in our series on creating ceramic and porcelain objects using FluidDesigner for 3D printing. In today's lesson we're going to show you how you can actually create a triangular cross-section vase. So if you go to FluidDesigner and if you go to Learning Projects, Ceramic and Porcelain Projects, we're doing lesson number 3, so it's 03 triangular, and it's the Blender file that we drag and drop onto the workspace. And this object, or rather there's two objects here. There's a Bezier Curve on the left hand side here. That's the blue line, which is currently in edit mode. You can add your own Bezier Curve to the workspace by going to Add Curve and Bezier. That is in fact attached to this object here. In other words, it's controlling it, and we've done that for you. And that's quite an awkward process, so we've done the design of that for you, so that all you need to do is to drag and drop basically. But this Bezier Curve is linked to a Bezier circle. This main body of this object is a Bezier circle, which we can go to Add Curve and Circle. But what we've done is we've actually modified the circle into this triangular cross section. So it is a Bezier Curve linked to a Bezier circle like lesson 1 and 2, but we've modified the cross section of the circle to a triangular section. Now if you go to templates and go to cross sections, what you'll find is that there are a range of templates there. There's a circular cross section template, so in other words this object but with a circular cross section. There's a triangular template, which is this one. There's also a square template, so if you wanted to create a square cross section vase, you'd use this template. There's also pentagon, hexagon, octagon and decagon. Those are all template files, and all you need to do is to drag and drop them onto the workspace and then change them into the shapes that you want. You do need to be careful that you don't delete the original template files from your disk. So we're doing this lesson today here, and as usual the help instructions here are in the help panel on the left here. You can just read through those, although there are one or two things we're going to do in today's lesson which are not in this help instructions. So I'll just move that back out of the way, we don't need to see that. And I'm just going to switch on screencast keys, so any key presses I make should be displayed in the lower corner of the window here. And so I'm just going to go to view and change the view to the front, because that's usually the best thing to do when you're creating vases of this sort of shape, this sort of style, because then you can see what the profile of your object is looking at it from the left. So as you can see, we can modify this vase into a wide variety of shapes, and I'm just scrolling the center mouse button there and just heightening the object. Okay, so I'm going to modify it to that at the moment. Now if you want to actually measure the size of this object, you can count the centimeters. The units at the moment are centimeters, so you can count each of these boxes. Or if you come out of edit mode, if you press the tab key, that will deselect edit mode, and if you go along the toolbar you can select the interactive ruler and you can measure the size of that. So that's about 99, that's about 100 millimeters or 10 centimeters, which will be okay for a vase. And you can measure the height, so it's about 150 millimeters, that's 15 centimeters high. So again, that's pretty much okay for a vase. So I'm going to stick with that shape at the moment, and I'm going to stick with that profile that I've got. Now, as I've said, this object here is actually a curve, a Bezier curve, and we can't print curves. We've always got to change curves to meshes. And we do that in FluidDesigner by highlighting the object itself and then going to Tools, Object Tools and Convert to a Mesh. And you'll see the colour change. Now if I click on the Bezier Curve on the left hand side there now, and if I press the Tab key and switch into Edit mode, what you'll notice now is that these two objects are no longer linked. Once we've changed the Bezier curve, circle into a mesh, I know it's not a circle in this case, it's triangular shape. Once we change it into a mesh, we can't change the profile anymore because the two objects are not linked. But what we can do is, with this Bezier curve highlighted, if we press the X key on the keyboard, we can actually delete that object because we're not going to print that. Wouldn't print anyway, but we might as well get rid of it. This is our main object now. So what have we got? We've got this triangular cross-section vase, but it's got a hole in the bottom. So if you've seen lesson 1 and 2, you should have seen how we can add a face to the bottom of this. First of all, I'm just zooming in using the center mouse button and scrolling it. With the object highlighted, we need to press the tab key to switch into edit mode. And if I click on each of the 3 corners down here, I can highlight them. But in order to highlight all 3 of them and put a face at the bottom here, I need to hold down the shift key. So I'm holding the shift key down now on the keyboard and highlighting each of the 3 vertices, each of the 3 corners of this bottom of this object. And if I now press the F key on the keyboard, I will fill that in. I'll put a face on the bottom of my vase, which is obviously something that we need. Now we're now going to modify the bottom of this vase slightly by putting in a bevel. In other words, we're going to straighten it off here first of all, rather than come down to a sharp point at the corner. So I'm just going to reposition the vase on the screen so you can see what we do. So I'm going to click the right mouse button now, and with the bottom of the vase highlighted, I'm going to go to make a bevel edge. And I now need to move the mouse down off the screen, and as you can see, there is a bevel created, and the position and size of that bevel will vary depending upon where I put the mouse. So if I just click there, for example, that will select it. Now we can still fine-tune this. Okay, I'm just zooming in with the center mouse button. If I open up the toolbox, and you must do this straight away, you shouldn't actually go and click anywhere else on the screen. You must open up the toolbox, and if I open up this panel at the bottom, as long as bevel's still highlighted, you can change the bevel amount here. You can fine-tune it, you can set it to a particular value, so you could enter it in as 0.5. That means all of your objects could be like that. Now what that's given us at the moment is a straight flat bevel around the 3 sides of this object. I want a more rounded shape, so I'm going to add some segments. So if I just click on here, you'll see what's happening. I'll just zoom in again a bit further. Okay, I'm adding segments to this bevel face, and it's breaking it up into 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8 segments, and what that's doing, as you can see, is rounding it off. And that's actually the sort of shape that I want in this instance. So there's my beveled edge at the bottom of my vase, and my beveled edge is also rounded off. So if I now go to view in the front again, and I'm just going to press the home key. If I press home key on the keyboard, that will put the object pretty much in the center of the workspace. So we've got the bottom of this highlighted at the moment, and we're in edit mode, so we need to come out of that. First of all, I would suggest you press the A key on the keyboard. That will deselect the bottom of the object. Okay, so that just deselects those that highlighted part of the object. And if I just press the tab key on the keyboard, that will take me out of edit mode. Now our object has actually got no thickness. We still couldn't print this, even though it is a mesh. We still can't print it because we've got no thickness to this object. It's just a shell. So we can add some thickness to it by using the modifiers. Again, if you've seen lesson 1 and 2, we can add a solidify modifier, and if I just open up this panel, we can change the thickness here. As you can see, it's adding some thickness to our object, 2 mil, 3 mil, 4 mil, etc. And 4 mil is typically a good value. Now there is this other value here, offset, and if we put the offset at 0, what it does, it adds the thickness on the inside and the outside of the original shell. If we put it as +1, it adds the thickness entirely on the outside of the original shell. If I hold down the mouse button, I can change this dynamically from -1, so the thickness is on the inside of the original shell, to +1, which is the thickness on the outside. So I'm going to leave it as +1 in this case, and just scroll it back. Now to apply this, Once you're happy with it, once you're happy with the shape and the thickness, you need to apply this modifier, and you can do that by going to Tools, Object Tools, and convert it to a mesh, and that panel should clear away now. And there's our finished triangular shaped vase with a thickness of about 4 millimeters and this rounded beveled profile on the bottom. Whoops. So we now need to save that, and as usual in FluidDesigner we never go to File and Save, always use Save As, and just come up out of the menu system there, so come out of Learning Projects and save yours in the My Projects Ceramics folder, and it's a triangular vase that you're going to save, and save it as a Blender file. Now you can't print Blender files, so you've always got to export them, and we use the wavefront object format, and we like, as a matter of habit, to export them to the desktop, and we're exporting it as O3 triangular vase OBJ object file. So we export the object file, and we always recommend in using FluidDesigner, you always need to go to Netfab Basic and go to Project and Open, and if you go to the desktop you can open up that lesson O3 triangular vase and you can analyze your vase in Netfab Basic, and Netfab Basic will correct any problems with your mesh. Now there aren't any warning triangles here, so it's probably going to be okay this, but we would always recommend whatever that you go to Extras and repair the part. One thing Netfab will always do is triangulate faces. Okay, so it's triangulated those faces for you, putting it in a printable format. And if I just drag the window across, it's just too big for my video capture one. If I just click on Update here, you'll see there aren't actually any problems. There are no border edge problems, no orientation problems, and no holes. But again, we would always recommend that you run repair and execute it, and that you apply the repair and remove any old parts. And now what we're going to do is save that. So if we export it as a wavefront object again and export it to the desktop, Netfab Basic adds this little bit of text repaired there, and that is your printable file now. That's the file you should send to your printer. Now if we just go back to FluidDesigner, one of the things about this particular object is that it's very straight along the edges here. If I just load it again, go back to the original file, lesson 03, you'll see that these edges are very straight, whereas if I click on Group Library there and go to Cross Sections, the other templates have got a more rounded appearance to them. More rounded appearance. And you can change from straight edges to a rounded appearance by changing the control points here. If we click the right mouse button, we want to change the handle type. We want to change the handle type from vector. Yeah, this one is currently set up in vector format, which gives you these straight lines. We want to change it to automatic. But before we do that, we want to highlight all the control points along this Bezier curve. And we can do that by pressing the A key on the keyboard. Oops, let me switch on screencast keys again. Press A key on the keyboard, that will select all 5 control points, or A key will deselect them. I want to select them all. If I click the right mouse button and set handle type, if I change it to automatic, you should see that you get a more rounded profile on this object. It's a more rounded shape. And if I modify it, you can see what I mean. It started off as vector format, and again, if I press A on the keyboard to select all of them, if I change that handle type to vector, you'll see that I get a much more straight appearance. Now, with triangular vases and square vases, you might want this sort of appearance. If you want a more rounded feel to your objects, you need to change that before you convert the main body of this object into a mesh. So that's just one additional point to note. So that's the end of today's lesson, where we've created a triangular shaped vase using a Bezier curve linked to a Bezier circle. Thank you.